You who want to move down a little bit, please feel free to get closer to where our main speaker will be speaking tonight. It's just so good to have a chance to talk to Standish and to Jim Burns, who has done such a great job with this group, and I'm thrilled to be here. So wanted to start off with kind of something different. Times we give what we are called Empowered Citizens Awards. They look like this. They're for special people. And I've got one I want to award tonight. And this is going to go to somebody who I met in 2007, which was 14 years ago. We both were a little bit younger then. I found myself in the middle of a tax levy campaign to stop a sales tax. It was for a new jail where we would be paying about 2 or 3 times the cost of an average jail cell to build. And we had 6 weeks to get 58,000 signatures. And it was tough. And there was a gentleman named Ed in Clifton that started running the campaign. And in 2 weeks, I think we had 1,500 signatures. Pat DeWine was a friend of mine. I called him. He asked me if I'd try to run the campaign. I stupidly said yes. And the first person that called me, literally the first person that called me, was the gentleman I'm going to introduce in just a couple minutes. He called me and he said, listen, and I just bought this big building up where EmpowerU studio is, and I was just scared about that and stuff. And he said, listen, could I come over to your building twice a week and do classes to teach people how to petition and how to get these petitions done so that we can get this tax levy repealed? I said, sure, please do. He came up, we had, I mean, this shows you how much things have changed in 14 years. Even the Enquirer published the times of the classes, if you can believe that. And this gentleman came up and he taught the classes. We had maybe 10 or 12 citizens at each one, and it was invaluable. He's done so many things. He's for Cincinnati. He's a Cincinnati guy. And every time I watch him work, I'm just amazed by what an empowered citizen he is. He's challenged mayoral candidate Aftab Purival recently. He's fought Governor Mike DeWine's COVID-19 restrictions. He was a big opponent. Yeah. He was a big opponent to Barbara Holidell's famous bus tax. He was against the streetcar. He was the guy that without him, the whole Gang of Five thing would have never been stopped. He fought for things against things like red light cameras. He's held this city accountable with many public records requests. And I think the best resume builder for this gentleman that I read when I saw this incredible full-page article last week in the newspaper, he said he hasn't seen the article yet. It's really an entire page about him. The best resume builder for this gentleman is from Tim Burke. I know many of you know Tim, who has led the Democratic Party for so long. Tim said he's an activist. I'm not particularly impressed with what he chooses to be active about. If anything ever happens to me, if somebody could say that about me, Tim Burke, I think that's a great thing. But the city of Cincinnati, especially with so much corruption, needs empowered citizens like Mark Miller to protect the public. Mark Miller, would you come forward and accept your Empowered Citizen Award? Come on around. I'm going to make you get up here. And so this award, it says Empowered Citizen Award. It says for protecting the citizens of Cincinnati every day. Another round of applause for Mark. Thank you, sir. Let's take it. Thank you. Anything you'd like to say, Mark?
No, just thank you, Dan. I appreciate the recognition, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of stories like that coming out of every one of these people in the coming years in the fights ahead.
Thank you, Mark, very much. Thanks for being an empowered citizen. Hey, Mark, I know a good frame shop where maybe we could maybe get this framed for you since you haven't seen it yet. Couple other announcements. I wanted to announce tonight something for those of you who haven't been to a lot of our classes that we did after Rush Limbaugh's death. We started an EmpowerU Liberty Scholarship. It's our first scholarship. It's a $1,000 scholarship to any student in the 12th grade or in the 1st through 4 years of college. It's open to anybody, and you can go to empoweruohio.org. There's an application. You should tell your kids about it, your grandkids, and it's got a simple question that I might ask our guests to help us judge, and that simple question is, what does liberty mean to you? So it's a Liberty Scholarship. We're thrilled to have the chance to give it away. So make sure to tell your friends and relatives about it. So EmpowerU loves a good giveaway. So I've got a couple things I'm going to give away tonight. The first thing I wanted to give you a promo for our class on Thursday night. It's a class that I'm gonna teach. I love teaching one class a semester. It's something I've been so passionate about learning about, and that's the life of Winston Churchill. It's from 7 to 8:30. You don't have to come up to EmpowerU Studio. You can sit in your pajamas and watch it at home. We just have a great new high definition camera that is fantastic. And I want to paint this picture for you about Winston Churchill, what we're going to be talking about. So imagine the year's 1940. It's May 10th when Winston Churchill becomes prime minister. 18 days after he becomes prime minister, 3 men come knocking at his door. They say, we're going to meet. One of them is Neville Chamberlain, who was the previous prime minister of Great Britain. And he says to Churchill, he says, it's over. We can't lose any more men. You've got to figure out a way to get out of this war and end it. The second person is Lord Halifax, who's head of the Conservative Party, which is Churchill's party. Churchill was originally a liberal, but later in life became a conservative. And he tells Churchill, he said, I just got a wire from Benito Mussolini, the dictator in Italy. And Mussolini says, Hitler says, you've got to negotiate to end this. And the funny thing about Churchill, he called, he had this nickname for Mussolini that he loved. He called Mussolini the boastful Mussolini, who's a serf and a lackey. And so Halifax said, you got to end it. And then third, from France, comes a politician from France named Paul Renault. He says, listen, France is going to surrender within the next couple of days. It's over. We can't go on. And if we surrender, all of the best ships in the entire world's Navy, 300 that France has, are going to be lost. And they're all coming to Great Britain. You've got to end the war. And it was an amazing moment in history when you look at a map and you see that almost the entire world at that point in time had gone to Hitler. So if it was a typical day for Churchill, he would have mixed in a pint of Paul Roger champagne. He would have smoked 8 to 10 Cuban cigars. He would have drank some white wine for lunch, a little red wine for dinner, a little brandy or cognac afterwards, and he would have kept it awake till 3 o'clock in the morning, dictating to his many secretaries what they needed to do. He was a fascinating guy, and I hope you will consider joining us Thursday night for that presentation on leadership. So I've got using as my text that we're going to give away tonight. So take out your red ticket, and it's the red ticket, and this is for the Churchill book. It is number. Never, we will never surrender. Very good. You should win. Number 228. 228. 228. Red ticket. Anybody win out there? Okay, let's try another one. Let's keep going. How about number 135? 135. Okay, come on forward. We've got a winner. Jay, I'm going to ask you to give Mel if you could give Mel the book. I hope you enjoy it, Mel. Let's give Mel a round of applause, everybody. And then I don't want to, it's not my position being a guest to get in the middle of RGC's politics, but I hope you guys EmpowerU and become a Pepsi Diet Pepsi group. Could we I don't know how you do it. I don't know if you do it by secret ballot or voice vote, but could we, all those in favor, say Pepsi? For those who think young, right? A 24 pack, a whole case of Pepsi to give away for your ticket. And that would be ticket number, how about ticket number 158? 158. All right. Come on down. And I'll kind of push this at you. Congratulations in your name. Judge, okay. Congratulations, Judge. Judge, come on. Yeah, come on up. So I take that, Jim, that's a positive, that we can count on the Pepsi thing. So, Judge, welcome here. We're glad to have you. Thank you. Okay, great. Just a couple more things. So Jim Burns right here, he contacted me 60 days ago and asked me if I'd come and speak to your event in March. I wasn't able to, I was out of town. And I said to Jim, Jim, I'm kind of a grade B speaker. I don't think I can carry a whole class, but I sure know somebody, our guest tonight, who can, and that's Bob McCune, who I'm looking forward to having in just a couple minutes. But I want you to give Jim Burns a round of applause for all his hard work. And Standish too, please. A round of applause for Standish. So I, when I talked to Jim 60 days ago, I said to Jim, listen, if I do come, I've got to talk to you about something that's on my mind, that's important, that I think I need to share with the group. And so I hope you'll bear with me for just a couple minutes, because there's something I want to tell you about that's important. You know, Dennis Prager, how many of you who know who he is? Raise your hand. He says the worst news is that sending your child to almost any elementary school or high school is, whether it's public or private, it's equally toxic. It doesn't matter, they're all bad. And that may in fact be the case with schools that are under the jurisdiction of the Ohio School Board. About a month and a half ago, I heard from somebody called me from up north, somebody who comes to the EmpowerU events, and said there's something that the school board has passed that I think you need to learn about. And it was something called the Resolution to Condemn Racism and Advance Equity. Doesn't sound too bad. It's something that's almost identical to a law that was passed in Hamilton County right after Todd Portune died. It was almost like a copy and paste job. And what this resolution basically said was that the school board up in Columbus up there would start indoctrinating their employees, and they would train their employees appropriately, and that all employees would be forced to go through a reflection and internal examination of their own racist beliefs. And it also said that it had an assumption that every single person that worked in their area had implicit biases. And that's regardless of what's here in their heart. And as I read this resolution that this woman sent me, I couldn't help but feel that this was the start of what I knew was coming, which is critical race theory in Ohio. I went on the state school board's website and I found a link to the 1619 project. And that's the project many of you have heard about that the New York Times put out that says that America was founded in 1619 by Black slaves, and it wasn't founded in 1776 by the founders of our great country. There was an article on this website from somebody you may have heard their name. Her name is Nicole Hannah Jones. And essentially, it said that democracy has been born on the backs of Blacks, and that Black people have seen the worst of America. This article listed different curriculum that would be suggested to schools. It listed lesson plans. It listed, in my mind, as I read through it, really anti-American things I wouldn't want my students even to think about. So when I was done with my research, I got another call from an education warrior up north, and she said, have you seen this article? And I've got 100 handouts for you tonight. I'll make sure they're on the back table when you leave. It's an amazing article. You'll be shocked to see it. It's called Smashing Whiteness in the Classroom. This is another article that was on the website of the Ohio School Board. And in the article, it just says just some things you're not going to believe. It had links to white people have no culture. It said, let's see here, some of the good ones. In defense of looting. Capitalism is the real robbery. Delegitimizing the police. This is an article in the City Journal, which is a magazine that I didn't know anything about, but Bill Bennett recommends, Bill Bennett, the education secretary. And it made fun of Ohio. How could any state allow this to be put up on a website? They did take this stuff down. So after I'd kind of done my research, I called the school board president. I also talked to the superintendent, President Kohler, Superintendent DeMaria, and I said, I need you to take this 1619 project down. It's been proven this is false stuff. You cannot put this out for teachers to look at, to teach their students. It's not the right thing to do. She said, well, I think maybe it's a mistake that it's up there. I'll check around. She called me back after she talked to the superintendent and said, even though there might be some articles that might be a little bit false, we trust our school teachers. We're going to leave the information up on the website. So after learning what I'd learned, I felt like I needed to write Mike DeWine and tell him that your school board in Ohio has become radicalized. You've got a bunch of radicals up there that are doing things that we don't want, because our founders were so clear on this. Washington and really his chief lieutenant, Alexander Hamilton, they said, we as people must be united and unified. Thomas Jefferson, who founded the University of Virginia, in his dying days, his #1 priority was to teach young people about liberty and about the fact that all men are created equal. And he should know, he's the guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence. And Abraham Lincoln, after the Civil War, 360,000 Union soldiers died trying to make it a better land. Lincoln's words were, we are one people. Well, my question to Governor DeWine is, how can our country and students be unified if they're being divided by race by our state school board? And I think it's ridiculous. And this critical race theory is everywhere. Somebody sent me, I've got people sending me stuff all over the state. Up in Beechwood Schools, which is north, right by Elyria and Kings Island, there was a forced critical race theory training session at the Beechwood High Schools. The parents literally revolted. And there's a YouTube video, call it up, you won't believe what it says, where the person who really led the initiative was an African-American woman who just said, you can't teach this stuff to our students. We just don't want it here. It seems the governor, his new thing is equity. So it's kind of a buzzword. Equality, we know what that means. We're all treated equal, unbiased competition. Equity means that it's okay to treat people different, to discriminate against them, because we're going to make sure that everybody's outcome is exactly the same. And to clarify, our founders, they didn't talk about equity, they talked about equality. They talked about something that a friend of mine reminded me about, called the freedom of your mind. You should have a free space up there where you can live your life and think and do what you want to do, and not have people pushing something down your head. And in Ohio, my friend Tom Hagedorn, maybe some of you know Tom, reminded me that it's called something different in Article 7 of the Ohio Constitution. It's called the right of conscience. You all have the right in Ohio to have the right of conscience. And that means that you shouldn't let somebody like a school board come and mess with your right of conscience, because really a student's well-being is their ability to feel good about themselves, to be safe. So this whole critical race theory, I don't know. I'm confused about how our governor would let it come here, but he does appoint 8 out of the 19 positions on the school board. And surprise, surprise, 7 of the 8 people voted for this resolution. It's just shocking to me. So I've been learning this, and I made a decision. I wanted to testify to the state school board. The meeting was today. I thought today was going to be a double day for me. That first, the second, and they had specific deadlines when you had to contact them by. I contacted them by Sunday at 5 o'clock and said I wanted to testify today. And I got an email back from the president of the State Board of Education, and she explained to me, we've made a decision that we're not going to let you testify. And we're not going to let you testify because we've decided we're not going to listen to any testimony about race. And what I want to I just need to lay this on you. This is your state. This is Ohio. And what I'm asking tonight is we're mobilizing a group of liberty groups around the entire state to meet next week to kind of try to organize a plan to stop this. My vision of critical race theory in Ohio is to draw a fence around the state and to keep this crap out. That's what I want to do. And if this is something that you are passionate about, I never considered myself an education person. This is just so grievous. I just can't sit by and watch it happen. I'm asking Standish and Jim Burns to try to nominate 1 or 2 people from your group to be a part of the group of 15 or 20 people that are going to meet from around the state to try to stop this, because I want you guys to be involved. You've got a very powerful group. I know many of you. I've seen many of you at our events, and I'm just so glad. I think what I'm going to, if the governor ever responds to my letter I wrote him, I don't know if he ever will. I know he's busy. I respect that. I think the thing I want to know is, and I want him to know, is that his legacy for Ohio, it shouldn't be about pitting students against one another just because they have different color skin. It just shouldn't be, and I hope it won't be. It's just a pleasure to be here with you tonight, and thank you for listening to my rant, and thank you for having me. Now, I'd like to introduce our guest that we're thrilled to have with us. Bob McCune spoke at a recent EmpowerU last November. Right after all the bad stuff on social media happened, we had an incredible session where we had 14 people talk about big tech and what to do about it. And I think Bob's comments about free speech and the importance of it were some of the best comments the entire night. Bob has served 6 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives representing Ohio. During his congressional tenure, Bob was selected by his colleagues to the senior position as one of 4 Republicans on the powerful House Committee Rules that manages floor time for members and has jurisdiction over all legislation. He was also a member of the House Select Committee on Intelligence and a U.S. delegate to the European Parliament for over a decade. Prior to Congress, he served 3 terms in the Ohio House of Representatives. I found this part extremely interesting considering what I just talked about. In 2020, Bob was appointed by President Trump to the 1776 Commission, which was formed explicitly to keep critical race theory out of states like Ohio. And of course, we know that one of the very first decisions was made to do away with that commission, which is terrible. Bob is also the executive director of the Council for National Policy. He's known for his ability to communicate complicated issues, and his mission is to empower interested citizens to make decisions that bring prosperity to their family, state, and nation. We're thrilled to have the great speaker, Bob McCune. Thank you so much. Do you want them? Sure. Sure.
He wants us to be seen with each other. So we go down together.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. What do you think? 4, 75, 55, a little bit, can you go to half? Got to find a little bit of half, holy, no, thank you, sir. All right, good, there we are. Now we're going. And isn't that something was mentioned about the 1776 Commission, which was to merely say that the United States of America was born in 1776. Now, we all knew that, and yet those who hate America, who do not understand that we are a republic, they are Democrats, and they believe that our rights come from the group, and that's what Democrats believe. The word democracy does not appear in any of our founding documents, in any of the constitutions of the 50 states, because we are a republic and our rights do not come from the group. But they think that does. That's why they constantly talk about women's rights and Hispanic rights and all that. And they decided that slavery was what built America. They have loved slavery. They fought a war for slavery. When they lost the war, they then created what was called the Jim Crow laws, in which they said that if you had a different skin color, you couldn't have the rights of America. And so we passed the 14th Amendment that said you had to treat everybody equally. Not one single Democrat voted for it. It was sponsored by a congressman from Ohio, and it was incorporated. And then we thought that would handle the thing, but no, they still wouldn't let blacks vote. And so we passed the 15th Amendment that said that people could vote regardless of their skin color. Every Democrat voted against it. Not one Democrat voted for it. And they want to take the fact that there was slavery prior 150 years before George Washington was even born. But they are so in love with slavery that they said, if you just have a little bit of it, that creates prosperity. And America is great because it had slavery back here. And they're trying to teach that nonsense. And that somehow or another, it's more than nonsense, it's evil. And they're trying to teach that America was founded in that day. And so the president put together a handful of folks that don't swallow that, about 10 of us. And we wrote the 1776 report. And president is sworn in on January 20th at 12 noon. Usually what they do then is come down Pennsylvania Avenue, have a parade, and then change for dinner and go, or for dinner and dancing, and have an inaugural ball. The first day they come in, is the next day on the 21st at 9 o'clock, they sit down in the Oval Office and they say, here I am as the president. Whoever this guy is, Biden, could not wait until dinner. At 4:30 in the afternoon, been president for less than 5 hours, he abolished the 1776 Commission. And I would encourage you to read it. I think it's a pretty good report. It just simply says the truth. And that is that there was a day in which people formed an idea that nobody had ever done before. And let's just walk through it just a bit, if I may, because let me tell you the thrust of what I'm about to discuss. Bastiat, who wrote the law and sort of the bedrock of Western civilization, says that the worst thing that can happen to a good cause is not to be skillfully attacked, but to be ineptly defended. I'm leaving here to go to Phoenix. Charlie Kirk has formed a group called Turning Point, and I'm on the board with him. And what we discovered is that these kids they don't believe in socialism. They don't know squat. They wouldn't know free enterprise capitalism if it hit them upside the head. All they've been taught is socialism, so they think that they're socialists, but they are empty slates. And so what I want to do during these few moments is just to walk through a couple of things as to why America is different. Now, Jay warned me that if I push this button, that I should wait a while. And eventually something else would happen. And he's right, and that's wonderful. But let me just remember, 4% of the population of the world call themselves Americans. And yet every year they write more books, more plays, more symphonies, more copyrights, more inventions than the other 96% combined. Why? For thousands of years, people hoped to someday fly. It was the Americans that invented the airplane and the light bulb and the telegraph and the telephone. The global positioning system, there's a ship parking in Hong Kong and in Singapore at this very moment using a global positioning system. There's a plane flying over the continent of Africa where socialism has allowed the air traffic control system to completely disintegrate using a global positioning system conceived, invented, and maintained by Americans. There's a Mercedes dealer in Buenos Aires ordering a part from Stuttgart using an internet conceived, invented, and maintained by Americans. There are skyscrapers all over the world. Why? Because an American by the name of Elisha Otis invented the elevator. And there are places where it's 100, 120 degrees. Why? because an American by the name of Willis Carrier, God love him, invented the air conditioner. No nation on earth has blessed the nation as we have. If a ship is attacked on the high seas, as happened over 300 times last year, to whom can they appeal? Only the 327,000 Americans wear the uniform of the United States Navy. America is the standard for righteousness in the world. But if a person such as Soros or someone else tries to inflate a currency and destroy the banking system of a country, to whom is going to prevent that from happening? If someone violates copyrights or patents, who enforces the law internationally? Only one country. And everyone appeals and turns to them and relies upon us. Scripture says if you want to take a city, you bind the strong man. There's only one strong man in the world, it's the United States. You take down the United States, the rest of it is a piece of cake. And how do you take down America? You take down its leadership. And that's the fight in which you are engaged. And for that, I am extremely grateful, and I'm glad that I'm here. In 1776, these folks got together and they came up with this idea. We hold these truths. Now that's fundamental. There has to be a starting point. If you're going to build a house, you drive a stake. That decides where everything else goes. You move the stake 6 inches, the next day the workers come in, everything else is off. There has to be a starting point, and there's only 2 starting points. One is what I think, and the other is what God says. And those are the only 2 options. If you're on Oprah, you can say it's my truth. And my truth means I do it my way. And the founders knew that there's only 2 choices, and so we hold these truths. Now, what is truth? I can say that this room is 35 feet wide. You can say it's 40, you can say it's 25, you can say it's 15. And we're all pleased as punch. We can just sit there and discuss it all at great length until someone comes in and measures it. And that measurement is truth. Everything else is just opinion. But here's the significance of truth. Truth reveals error. Therefore, error hates truth. So I can say 15 times, the room's 25 feet wide. Someone can come in and measure it, says it's 30 feet wide. Everyone in the room knows that what I said was wrong. Therefore, error hates truth and seeks to destroy it. But because truth reveals error, but it does even more than that. Truth overcomes error. So you are prosecuting a fellow for stealing an ATM machine. And his defense counsel gets up, why he wouldn't do such a thing. He loves his mother, and he was out in Oregon having dinner with his sister. And here's the receipt from the, you don't care what she says, because when she's finished, you're going to show a security camera of him driving his pickup up to the ATM machine. You'll see him put a chain around the ATM. You'll see his pictures, his face as he leans over the camera. You'll see his fingerprints as he pushes the buttons. And the truth will overcome the error such that the only way she can succeed, she has to prevent the presentation of truth. That's why you can't have one conservative professor on a college campus. That's why you have to shout out, only liberals, only socialists burn books. Conservatives don't burn books. We don't care. We're not afraid. You say anything you want, because when you're done, we're going to present the truth, and truth overcomes the error. That's why they have to shout them down. That's why they have to platform. That's why they have to tell the president and you and me that we can't be on Facebook, that we can't be on these things, because our truth overcomes the error. And then we'll conclude with the fact that that's the fight that we're in, and actually that we're going to win it. But let's go on. We hold these truths to be self-evident, which is a gracious way of saying any idiot ought to understand this. You be blind, deaf, and dumb, bozo. This is self-evident. Anybody ought to know that all men are created equal and are endowed by a 5-4 decision of the Supreme Court, are endowed by their creator. Rights only come from 2 sources. They come from the group, or they come from God. In America, in 1776, we believe that our rights come from God. Our daughter spent a year in Our daughter spent a year in Rwanda. 80% of the people in Rwanda are Hutu, 20% are Tutsi. 80% voted democratically to kill the 20%. And over the course of 90 days with machetes, they chopped 1 million people to death. That's a democracy. In America, you can vote 95-5 to kill Jews. You can't do it. Why? Because we believe our rights come from God. And what are they? One of them is, I'm waiting, here it comes, here it comes. No, but there it is. Good. Among those are life. You say, well, no. That's between a woman and her doctor, and I don't want government involved in the bedroom. And what do they call the not an independent, but libertarian. And I don't think government. You're in the wrong country, honey, because it says right there in our birth certificate that to secure these rights, the purpose of the United States government is to protect life. And then liberty. Notice the sequence. See, liberty is of precious little value if you're dead. You have to have life first, then liberty, then sewer systems and overpasses. But the first thing that government is supposed to do is to protect life. And if you want to know how a person believes, ask them how they stand for life. When we hired people, we'd always ask them, what do you think about life? Well, now I'm supposed to be the receptionist, so that's my private opinion. Yes, that's exactly right. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Don't let the door hit you. Because if you don't believe any politician that will take innocent life will not hesitate to tell you when you got to be home in bed, whether or not you can cover your face, whether or not you can have a restaurant, how close you can sit, and not hesitate to take away your liberty. Knowledge drives away fear. And it was the more knowledge that we have, fear hath torments. And our desire is to understand what's before us. We don't have time for this. This is really, it's really quite important. All right, let me just touch on it for a bit. How do I get money? What is money? Money is a representation of a contribution that I've made to someone else. So you walk into a shoe store and you say, I'd like to have that pair of shoes. The owner says simply this: what have you ever done for anyone that would entitle you to those shoes? You say, well, I mowed Widow Johnson's yard. How do I know you mowed Widow Johnson's yard? Well, I have this. What is that? It's a $20 bill. It is a representation of a contribution that I made to someone else. So, well, it's a nice contribution, but it's not significant. You mow our lawn a few more times, and when you've done it, you'll be able to afford the shoes. And so the purpose of money is to represent what you've done for others. Now, under free enterprise, there's only two ways to get money. There's only two ways to get money. There's a car going down the street out here. There's only two ways I can get money out of that person's pocket. One is called free enterprise. That is where I lay awake nights figuring out ways how to do something good for the person, such that they slam on the brakes, pull in the parkway, and say, oh my goodness, you're going to wash my car and clean the windows and sweep the carpeting. I would much rather have that than have this $10 bill. Oh, you're going to a global position, $200, I'll never get lost again. I'd much rather have that than have this $200. And under free enterprise, you figure out ways to do something good for someone such that they voluntarily reach into their pocket and make an exchange, which at the end of the exchange, they are both better off. And if they're not, they don't make the exchange. They have created wealth. They are wealthier than they were before the exchange. And here's the point. That's the only way that wealth is created. Let's hit it again. There's a farmer over here with a pile of wheat. There's a baker here with 10 empty ovens. He said, if I had his wheat, I could make donuts and sell them in the morning. The farmer says, I don't need the wheat. If I had his money, I could put a new roof on the barn, buy a new tractor. And the two of them make an exchange, which at the end of the exchange, they are both better off, and they have created wealth. And that is the only way that wealth is created. Now, I said there are two ways to get money out of that car going down the street. The other is that I come over and I have a gun, and I stick my pistol in the window, and I say to the driver, I want 50% of everything in your purse. And so she gives the money to the criminal. Question: has she created any wealth? No. Well, has wealth been transferred? Yes, from her to him. But the degree to which he benefits is the degree to which she's diminished. So no wealth has been created. And so they have redistributed the wealth. They haven't created the wealth. And Democrats do not have a clue, and this applies to probably 80% of the Republicans in Congress, do not understand how wealth is created. If you grew up on a farm, you learned it. And for America, and for 150 years, agrarians, you understood this. But most of them do not. AOC, who only has an economics degree from the Boston University, so she has no clue as to how wealth is created. So when a person comes up and takes the money away from them, it does two things. It rewards the person who didn't produce it. Oh, somebody shot someone. We can run down and steal everything from Walmart and break in and steal all. They get rewarded for having not done something, which discourages them from producing. And the person that earned it doesn't receive the reward for having earned it, so he doesn't produce. And the degree to which you do that is the degree to which you create poverty. So socialism creates poverty every time. When the communists took over in Chile and they said everybody's going to be paid the same, within 30 days, the productivity in the copper mines fell 70%. Socialism only creates poverty every time. Now, let's don't call that person sticking their gun in the window. Let's don't call him a criminal. Let's call him a congressman. And he takes the money away from them. Do you understand? The impact is the same. So you go to the pay window and you pick up your money and you're walking across the parking lot, and a fella comes up, puts a gun to your ribs, says, I want 50% of everything you got. You sit home with your wife and children and say, this is how much money we have for food, clothing, and shelter, the kind of vacation we can take, the kind of car we can buy. Or let us suppose that you pick up your check, you go to the truck, you open it up and you see Uncle Sam's already been there. Half the money's already gone. The impact is the same. And so the principle applies that the greater the government, the greater the poverty, the greater the freedom, the greater the wealth. Now, how do we explain that here? That is, I can take it. Socialism is redistribution. So when you hear Democrats, they always talk about redistributing wealth. That marvelous mayor of New York that took the safest major city in the world and turned it into a hellhole in one term. And he thought he should be president for that. You know, so he probably is equally competent as what was successful. We remember Jimmy Carter, who inherited a farm, a peanut operation, debt-free, with a product that had a guaranteed return. The government subsidized it, so there's no way you can lose this. And of course, he went bankrupt, and so the Democrats said that man should be president if he's that incompetent. And so, what did socialists do? They redistribute what someone else created. And let me just touch on this for a second. We were leaving the embassy in Jakarta in Indonesia. That's where Barack Obama grew up. And the ambassador shouted at us as we were leaving. He said, watch for people standing along the highway for seemingly no reason. They'll throw bricks at American cars when they go by. Question would be why? Indonesia, same population as America, GDP the size of Illinois. Why would they do that? Because they live in a socialist country. What is socialism? Socialism is government control of the tools of production, of business. So you and I, if we go to Mexico, we can't go in the grocery business. Why? Because there's a handful of people that control the grocery business, and they have a relationship with the government. You and I can't go into the oil business. We can't go into the pipeline business. Because under socialism, the people that are rich are people who have a relationship with the government, and this is all throughout Latin America. And I wish I could explain this to the Pope, who had never visited America before he became Pope. And so his analysis is that rich people are people who owe other people, and they have no idea how they got their money. And so in Indonesia, how did they get their money? A person standing along the side of the road, he sees an American car going by. That's expensive. That means somebody is wealthy. That means they have a relationship with the government, and I have no chance to do it. Therefore, I hate the rich. In America, under free enterprise, that person can float into the harbor at Long Beach, California at 5 in the morning and own 3 7-Elevens by midnight, because you can go into business in America, and then if you're only successful by people voluntarily rewarding you. Therefore, in America, we honor the rich because we know how a person becomes rich in a free society. Democrats and socialists hate the rich. They don't know how they got it. They think it was some special deal that they got. And that is what socialism does. The richest man in Mexico, he controls all the cell phones for one reason. He has the monopoly on all cell phones. His name's Carlos Slim. He owns the New York Times. And so he has 60% higher than the average of cell phones around the world, but there's no competition. But the more important thing is that he gets repatriations. The largest income to the nation of Mexico, it used to be oil, now it's money coming from Mexicans in America, sending it back there. It's the #1 source of revenue for the country, and he gets a cut of all of it. So the more people that come, the more money he makes, and he owns Univision, and so he pumps anti-American garbage day after day after day, because that's the way socialists operate. And now that we know, we were blessed with a president that's going to put a stop to that, and we're going to see. But here's what we need to touch. Now, to explain, let us suppose that this represents $100, 100% of the income of any city or a state or a nation. When I'm finished here in about 3 minutes on this topic, I could make you president of Nicaragua or El Salvador, and you could make that country rich. It works very simply like this. Let us suppose this represents a $100 bill. And you go into the Walmart, and the most expensive thing in the store is $95. That means you are completely free to choose anything in the store. Let us suppose someone comes along and takes 25% of it away from you. What happens? Two things. Number one, you have fewer choices. There's some things you can no longer choose. Thomas Jefferson said freedom is having choices. The more choices you have, the more freedom you have. Anybody ever raised a teenager has had this debate. I want to make my own decisions. Right? But more than that, the more money I take away from you, the lower your standard of living, which just makes sense unless you're with the New York Times, and then that would be a profundity. But if I take money away from you, you're worse off. And so let us suppose that someone comes along and takes half the money. What happens? Fewer choices, less freedom, lower standard. Suppose someone comes along and takes 25%. What happens? Fewer choices, less freedom, lower. Suppose someone comes along and takes it all. What do they call a person who works all day and keeps absolutely nothing? That person is called a slave. Now, as we know, two people can come and take money away from you. One is called a criminal. He has a gun and can take money away from you. The other is called the government, has a gun and can come and take money away from you. And the point is, the impact is the same. Now, politics is very simply, which direction do you go on this chart? The freer that you can make any rich place poor. When Britain in 1978 was in a free fall, and they chose Margaret Thatcher to become prime minister. And what did she do? Immediately, she cut taxes. That meant she put money back in people's pockets to buy and save and invest. And by the time that she left, it had the 4th largest economy in the world. If you understand this, you can make any rich place poor, or you can make any poor place rich. The greater the freedom, the greater the wealth, and that's what politics is all about. Now, you show me where a city or a state or a nation is on that chart, and that principle applies. When I was in the state legislature, Ohio was #1 in new job creation, #1. And we elected a couple of governors, said we can put a stop to this. And so over the last nearly a decade, Ohio has been 48th or 49th. And for the first time in history, Ohio Buckeyes have said, thank God for Michigan. But we're 49th out of the new job creation. You can make any rich place poor or any poor place rich. And why doesn't it work? It will never, ever work. Not to say, well, you know, after all of these hundreds of years of trying it, and after the chaos that happened at Plymouth in 1620, and we can do it right. Let me tell you, it will never, ever work, and here's why. Let me do this in 3 minutes. That is, that let us suppose you're going to buy something for yourself. You care about two things. You care about price, because you're paying for it, and you care about quality. And nobody can make that decision as well as you can. You might pay $4 for a cup of coffee at 7 in the morning, for which you wouldn't pay 35 cents at 2:30 in the afternoon. When it's your money buying something for yourself, you care about those two things. Now, let us suppose you don't control those two things. Let us suppose you're going to buy something for someone else. Would you care about the price? Yes, because you're paying for it. But you're a little more flexible on the quality. By the time it breaks, they'll be married for 3 years. They'll forget who gave it to them anyway. This will be fine. And so we've all bought things for people we never would have bought for ourselves. We've always seen things as gift. We care about the price, yes, because we're paying for it, but not so much because we're going to consume it. Let's suppose it's the other way around. Let's suppose we're going to consume it, but we're not going to pay for it. And so the waitress comes along and says, would you like to have some orange juice with your breakfast? And you say, well, how much is it? And she says, well, it's $3.50 a glass. No, not really. It's fine. I don't need any. You say, oh, you got the pancakes. Well, it comes with the pancakes. Well, in that case, pour away. I'll take 3 glasses. You might walk off and leave half a glass. Why? You wouldn't do it if you're paying for it. Do you care about the quality? Yes, because you're consuming it. Do you care about the price? No, because you're not paying for it. Final example. Let us suppose that where you work, everybody that comes to work late has to put $5 in the kitty. And at the end of the month, the boss says, raffle it off and see who and we'll give them the money. And so it's the last day of the month, and the boss says, John, you're going out to lunch, find out how much money's in the kitty, and you count it out. It's $150. They buy something, and we'll raffle it off. And so it's lunchtime's over, and you forget about it, and you're about to come back, and you think, oh my goodness, I don't have time for this. And you look around, what am I going to do? And you see a 6-foot-tall stuffed frog in the window, and you go over and you check those, and it says $149. Oh, that'll be great. So you buy the frog and you bring it back and you stuff it in the closet. And at the end of the day, the boss invites everybody down, lectures to them about being late and all that. Draw the numbers, see who wins. Sally wins. What does she win? Open the door. 6-foot-tall frog. Everybody laughs and claps and goes. Put it in the parking lot. Put it in the front seat. She drives off. Everybody cheering. What's that called? That is called a third-party purchase. It's purchasing with something with money that's not yours, therefore you don't care about the price, to purchase something you're not going to personally consume, therefore you do not care about the quality. Had it been $400, you would have spent that. Had it been $200, you would have spent that. You don't care because it's not yours. Now, what I'm about to say is not liberal or conservative or Democrat or Christian Democrat or socialist or labor. This is just the facts, Jack. All government purchases are third-party purchases made with money that's not theirs to purchase things that will not personally consume. Therefore, will there be waste in the highway department? You betcha. Will there be waste in the Defense Department? You can count on it. That's why we believe, as Abraham Lincoln said, the government should do only those things which a man cannot do better for himself. Why? Because every time we take $1 from a person to save and invest and use to the maximum benefit of themselves and their family and run it through a third-party system called government, we are in the process of making the nation poorer. And you show me what percentage of the GDP of any city or state or nation, and the principle applies, the greater the freedom, the greater the wealth, the greater the government, the greater the poverty. A couple of quick examples there. I majored in economics, and they explained to us the reason that we were rich was because we had temperate climate, and we had lots of natural resources, and had any problem, we moved further west, all the crap. In fact, so I like to use this as an example because South Korea doesn't have any neighbors. You can't blame it on anything. It has the same heritage, the same culture, the same language, the same environment as North Korea. After the Korean War, when they divided the country, the 38th parallel, the president of South Korea told us when he said they got 75% of the arable land, we got most of the mountains, 25% of the arable land and all the refugees. They, over the last decade, 10% of the population of North Korea has starved. Now you get food, clothing, shelter. The first thing you do is food. They haven't even been able to do that. They eat sticks and leaves to fill up their stomachs. They walk around, bend down. South Korea, same heritage, culture, climate, language, has the 10th largest GDP on the planet. Now, why is it? Well, one got socialism, the other one got American freedom. And by the way, when Donald Trump went to meet with the North Korean, he's a salesman. And so he knows what they have nothing. As you know, they had nothing. He had to borrow an airplane. They don't have an airplane. All he has is this train left over from World War II. And so when they met and they came out and Trump's got his limo there and this 38-year-old kid says he wants to see the car. And so Trump lets him climb around in the presidential limo. But he explained to him, he had a video done. Now this drives the international diplomats crazy. And I remember watching them as he was meeting with him. He said, well, this should have had 2 years of preparation. I said, yeah, that's right. If you want to screw something up, you have to have 2 years of preparation to do that. The guy said he wanted to meet with him. He said this month. And so they went over there. And one of the things he did, he showed that this is the 10th largest GDP in the world. And this is the 4th. And this is the 2nd. He said, you're surrounded by people that are succeeding. And you live in this little hellhole. Now, if you can continue to do that and amount to nothing, or you can do, and he had condos. He showed the shoreline of North Korea, and you see these condos up here. And he had an auto manufacturing. All these guys are making cars because Kim Jong-un loves cars. And it began to sell the whole idea. But let's get back to the fact that in 1945, this country. You're getting really active now. I'm impressed. In 1945, Harry Truman ended World War II. And that's what Nagasaki looked like, but it got freedom. And so what happens with freedom? There's what Nagasaki looks like today. Now, at the same time that Korea was, at the end, Korea was third from the bottom. I want to come back here and look at this. At the end of the Korean War, Korea was third from the bottom of the poorest nations on earth. South Korea was. It got freedom. It's now number 10. At the same time that Korea was third from the bottom, the richest spot on the globe was a place called Detroit, Michigan. And by the way, it wasn't close. It was by 18% or nearly a fifth. So the same time, and now this is that's the train station. People, when they would come to visit America in the 30s and 40s, they want to make sure that they came through the train station because the murals in there were so attractive, everyone would see a part of it. This is what Detroit looks like today. There are 42,000 single-family dwellings that are not uninhabited or uninhabitable. And what happens if every time you go through an intersection, somebody comes along, puts a gun in, and takes half of everything you've got? What happens? Pretty soon you don't go through the intersection, right? All right. The population of Detroit is now lower than it was in 1900 because the richest place on earth elected a mayor who was a racist and began to do things. So now, how has some of these things changed? Let's wrap it up, and what I want to do is to go to questions. That is that we were on the threshold. If you go to the Federal Reserve Board website for St. Louis, they have a chart there that has the median income for Americans from 1996, 2006, 2016, the 20 years before Donald Trump becomes president. And it's perfectly flat. Now it jumps around, but at the end, it's only $200 difference. America is perfectly flat because we were taking money, and prior to that time, you put money in the bank and they loaned it to you and to me. And about 35 years ago, they said, nope, what we're going to do is we're going to send it to New York. And we're going to package it, and then we're going to send it to China, and we're going to build the factories there. We're going to build the roads there, and so that when you give money into the bank, you can't get it back. It goes elsewhere, and the bankers are making lots of money, and the jobs are being diminished over and over and over. So while America is being stuck, China is growing at the rate of 6, 8, and 9%, and it's just about to overtake us, and it's getting increasingly arrogant until finally in 2016 something miraculous happened. It wasn't because the political party was organized, because the chairman of the party, 6 weeks before the election, it's never happened in history, asked the nominee to get off the ticket. That's sort of the level of support. And it wasn't because of the great surrogate program. When you're running for office, you know who the most popular person is in Chillicothe. You want to have that person speak for you or ride with you in the parade, whether it be the sheriff or the mayor or whoever. It wasn't the surrogate program because every time Donald Trump would show up, the governor would leave the state lest he have to meet him. So what happened? Only 9 newspapers. One of them, Hillsborough Press Gazette, is the manager or the publisher was my old press secretary, is one of the 9 newspapers in the entire country that endorsed Donald Trump. And yet and so he begins to say, this idea of sending money over there, I think it's stupid and we're going to quit it. In fact is, we're going to say, in fact, you're running all this stuff through Mexico because you came up with this trade agreement that there's no tax on anything coming from Mexico. And so he took a picture of 5,000 acres of cars, of Chinese cars taken by satellite, and he sent it to the president of Mexico and the president of China and said, unless this stops within 30 days, all the taxes that are entitled to be on China are also going to be added to Mexico. And then of course we keep track of it because it's all empty, and he put a stop to it. He put tariffs on their cheating, and then he went around to people, and it was like he flipped on the light and people were been in the dark and woke up, and he said the Mercedes-Benz, you idiots, do you understand what you've done? That is, there's a supply chain, and you cannot make a Mercedes-Benz without their approval. They've got all the pieces. In America, George Bush gave a waiver that for the computers in all of our jet fighters could come from China. The Samsung couldn't make a refrigerator without pieces from China. He said, what is the matter with you people? This is crazy. And it was like they woke them out of a stupor, and they began moving the factories out of China into Vietnam or elsewhere back to America. Remember, going wave the magic wand. We've been losing 100,000 every decade. Suddenly it creates 500,000 new manufacturing jobs in less than 3.5 years. And the stock market, therefore, in China goes down 47%. The wealth is cut in half. And the stock market in America goes up 55%. So instead of being overtaken, now it goes out, and that offends the money makers who hate America, who don't care. They use us as a milking cow to use it for their benefits around the world, where they can pay people nothing and all the other things that go with it. Well, they had a very serious fight. And legally or illegally, they got control. They did a thing called ballot harvesting. That's how they stole California. Ballot harvesting is this: we'll just print ballots and mail them willy-nilly. You go collect them, harvest them, and bring them in, and we'll count them. You think there would be fraud? Yeah. And so that took California off the cliff. And then they began to do it in New Mexico, and then they began to do it in Oregon and Washington, and now the whole entire West Coast is gone. But then in 2020, they had an emergency called COVID. Now, COVID makes people sick, got it. But it doesn't kill any more than anybody else. But how do I know? Look at the death certificates, the number of people dying. And it's lower for 2020 than it was for 10 years ago and 15 years ago. So suddenly, if there's this explosion in deaths, it would show up. You have to have a casket, you have to have a death certificate. And yet, if you want to have control, and so they discovered that if they told people what to do, the people would succumb. Why? Because there's a thing called fear. And fear hath torments. The scripture says he hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. When you're fearful, you're weak. You're not powerful. You cannot love a person that you're afraid of. And a sound mind, when you're scared, when you're afraid, you don't think straight. And so in this spiritual battle of fear, this nation has succumbed to the fear that people, I read a book in the 1980s called The Russians. It was written by Hedwig Smith, who was the New York Times Moscow correspondent. And he told about how that these people were so ordered around and they couldn't think for themselves. He said, when you come out of the Bolshoi Ballet, there'd be a phalanx of mounted policemen all the way over to the subway. He said, if you didn't, the people would trample themselves. They had to be ordered and told what to do. He said, one April day, he was walking down the street, he didn't have his top coat on. Everybody yelled at him, why don't you have get your coat on? Why don't you have your coat on? He said, a guy going by in the bus, he put down his window screaming, get your coat on. He said, in America, you stand there naked, nobody'd say a word to you. I thought that was the case. And now I've discovered that people want to tell you and me what to do, and Americans accepted it. You see the pictures of everyone standing in salute. You see whole groups of people in their ties, and they're dressed as responsible. Every single one has a salute. Now you say, now not everyone wanted to do that. The pressure that came such that somebody stepped out of line, they would isolate them and then destroy them. And we are now in a stage in which we have people in office that discovered, well, this is fun. I'll just tell people to do this. I'll tell them they can't do that. I'll tell them how many feet they have to stand apart. I'll tell them how many people they can have dinner. I can tell you and I told our kids nothing good happens after midnight. You're going to be home at midnight. We have a governor who says, nope, 10 o'clock, you got to be in bed. Who in the world gave a person the responsibility to tell me in a free country what time I had to be in my house? who would have thought that a person, if Stalin had walked down Pennsylvania Avenue and said, I want every church in America closed, we would have stood up in righteous indignation, but instead we succumbed and let them do it. And now we have, they said because of this emergency, that we can take this idea of just printing ballots and flooding them around. And in the key states of Milwaukee, of Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania and Georgia, I campaigned 3 to 5 times a day the final week of the campaign in Georgia in the special election. I would point out to every crowd, I would say, we in Ohio, we woke up one day in August and everybody said, Georgia's in play, Georgia's in play. And we couldn't figure out why was Georgia in play. It was because your corrupt Secretary of State made a deal in the basement of the Capitol with Stacey Abrams that said, we're going to let you do what they do out in California. You just print the ballots and mail them to anybody you want. And so if there's an apartment building there that's been there for 40 years, and people might have registered there for the last 40 years, there'd be 500, 600, 1,000 ballots that just show up there. Now, there's only 200 people living in the building, but you can harvest all those and mail them in. And so immediately everyone on the left knew Georgia is now in play. And they took it. Now, 2 little quick asides. No nation on earth allows that to happen. None. And the State Department has 5 standards as to whether or not to legitimize an election. And number 1 is if they discontinue counting on election night. And every one of those states stopped counting. The entire world is watching Pennsylvania, and they say, oh, it's 1 o'clock. Why don't we all go home? Yeah, sure. Well, that's why we are now in a position in which we have a president, whether he knows it or not, is sitting in the Oval Office. And the person who is running it, who is Susan Rice, is putting these things under his hand. He couldn't explain the 1776 Commission. It was life dependent on it. But because it is right, they have to destroy truth because truth reveals their error. And so they've done all of these things, and they want to undo the presidency by doing away with the Electoral College. They want to do away with the Supreme Court by packing the Supreme Court. And they have already done away with the United States Congress by holding sessions that are by proxy. And they're passing billions of dollars without a single hearing and not anyone seeing what is in the bill. And they're voting by proxy with every Democrat voting for it and every Republican running against it, voting against it. But if Republicans, they have the responsibility to stand up and say, stop it. Because what they're doing is in violation of the way that our country is supposed to, and we're on the cusp. But I believe the next 24 months are going to be very critical. I think that we're going down for the count. I think one of us is not going to survive this operation. If they can steal elections, the America we know is gone. But if we can get the truth out and we expose as to what they do and what they've done, and we can get a fair election, that is H.R. 1, which is the bill that wants to allow do it nationwide, do away with the local election boards and replace it by Washington, which is their desire. If they're able to do that, we'd be finished. But if they pass the law and then they can't implement it, and we can get a fair election in 2022, then I believe we can kick them from here to kingdom come. And in the process, we can restore America. This has been pending for too long. And just a couple of quick observations. Every child had to read the farewell address. It was in every history book up to the 1960s, and for much of our history, they had to memorize it. But one of the points it says out that all the habits and dispositions, political prosperity, what causes it? It causes the two things. Politics, easy as pie. You only vote on 2 things: integrity and economics. The higher the integrity, the more I can look you in the eye, shake my hand, and keep my word. The higher the integrity and the lower the burden of government, the greater the wealth. The lower the integrity, the more bars I have to put on the window, the more guards I have to put around the door, the more thicker the contract has to be in order for you to fulfill it. The lower the integrity and the higher the burden of government, the greater the poverty. Those are the only 2 things that we vote on. And politics is easy as pie. Politics equals integrity plus economics, P plus I plus E. And so George, that was original with me, but George, he copied it too. And he said the political prosperity, religion, and morality are indispensable supports. And let us with caution indulge the idea that morality can be maintained without religion, that somehow or another, my truth is just as good as God's truth. He said, don't go down that road. It's very, very dangerous. And then he said, reason and experience both forbid the expect that our national morality can prevail at exclusion of religious principle. It was, my concluding thought is, do not become discouraged. This nation has been at a precipice many, many times. This one was Christmas, 1776. Poor George started out with 25,000 troops. They'd either been killed or abandoned, or disease had taken them to the point that he's now got 7,500 of them laying around on the ground there. And his friend and prayer partner, Benjamin Rush, comes down, the founder of the American Bible Society, and the second Abolition Society. The first Abolition Society was founded by Benjamin Franklin, for all you yahoots that think that America was founded on slavery. It was founded on, the Democrat Party was founded on slavery. They explained it every single time. And don't be telling me about America did this and America didn't do that. Rosa Parks couldn't sit in the back of in the front of the bus. No. America didn't do that, bozo. That bus company is look it up. It's the National City Bus Company from Chicago, Illinois. They ran buses in 38 states, 38 cities, in 16 states. They're not going to mistreat their customers. They wouldn't think about it. It was the Democrats in Montgomery, Alabama, on the city council that said that blacks could not sit up front. And when they wouldn't implement it, then they said, we're going to take away your franchise. And so they tried to get the busmen to implement it. And Rosa Parks said, no, I'm not going to do it. When they got to court, they said they can't do it. Now they have her picture, they have her statue in Statuary Hall in the Capitol and said, look what America did. America didn't do squat. Democrats did that every single time. Dinesh D'Souza is an immigrant. And he has a $100,000 pledge to anyone who can show him a Republican that ever owned a slave. Now, it's available anytime they want to do it. So if you want to talk about all this, I understand your heritage if you're a Democrat. I understand what you did and how much you love slavery and you think slavery creates wealth. And because we had a little bit of slavery, now America's built on slavery because slavery, you idiots. But don't be blaming it on us. And so in this situation, in which it's December 25th, and Benjamin Rush comes down and he says, George, we got to have a victory of some sort because their enlistments are up on January 1st. And George Washington's already written a letter to his cousin at Mount Vernon, and he said, I fear this thing is about up. It's about done, it's finished. And they figured they have to have some victory of some sort. And Kurt, can you give me my iPad there just for a quick second? And so on December 23rd, a fellow by the name of Thomas Paine wrote a thing called The American Crisis. And he said this. He said, these are the times that try men's souls. A summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from the service to their country. But he that stands with it now deserves love and thanks of both men and women. Tyranny like hell is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheaply, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness alone that gives a thing its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price on its goods, and it should be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated. And so George Washington read that on December 24th. He said, good, we need to get that to the troops. And so he said, how many of you 7,500 can stand? Now they're laying around there, hanging around for one reason. Little girls, they didn't have any food for them. They didn't have anything, no supplies and no ammunition, no nothing. And girls would come around and sell sandwiches to them and then report back to the British as to what their conditions were. And only 2,500 of them could stand. And he said, well, here's what we're going to do. He had this read to them. He said, what we're going to do is we're going to go down the river and cross the Delaware at Trenton, and we're going to attack the Hessians that are camped there. They have enough supplies and ammunition and food and things that if we can get that, we can make it through the winter. And so he said, Benjamin Rush said, the password has to be victory or death. And then George Washington said this. George Washington said, post none but Americans on guard tonight. I said, well, wait, no. They've all got birth certificates. I mean, my goodness, they got the uniform in the country. No, being an American is not physical. You and I can't become Japanese or Chinese, but anybody can become an American because American is spiritual. And he said, post none but the Americans on guard tonight. And just because a person has a birth certificate and might be elected to Congress, when those folks up there in Minneapolis and elsewhere, they are not Americans in the sense that George Washington recognized they were. He said, post none but Americans on guard tonight. And so they went down. And of course, as we know what happened, this tremendous storm. The blizzard was such that it tore their boots apart. They had to wrap burlap around their shoes, around their feet. They could follow because of the blood in the snow. They couldn't get across the river because it was chucked with ice. They were supposed to attack at dawn. By dawn, they're only halfway through. They're going to have to, it was noon before they could get across the river to attack it in broad daylight. And yet they attacked, and God blessed their victory. They only had 2 deaths. Both of them froze to death on the march. There were 5 wounded. One of them was James Monroe, got hit in an artery, began to spurt, which saved his life because people saw it and they plugged it in so that he could become the 6th president of the United States. Alexander Hamilton, 19-year-old Alexander Hamilton was aide-de-camp to George Washington. 22-year-old James Madison thought that would become 10 years later the father of the American Constitution. They had a victory that was so tremendous that it swept up and down the coast, and new people enlisted and America was born. There's nothing, that's bleak. He's trying to sell something that's never been done. An idea that just because God made you, that you should have rights. Nobody had ever done that, ever. And in this new idea of belief, he said, we're going to create a great country. It's now been lovingly handed to us. We know it works. We can look over our shoulder and see the greatness of it. The entire world sees it. We have a tie in the Senate. We're only 3 votes short in the House. If we can get 3 of them to stay home someday, we could take over the speakership at any given time. Whether or not there's folks who got to do it, I don't know. But just an aside, just to keep you happy, you know, you do not have to be a member of the House to be the speaker. They could make Donald Trump Speaker of the House. But the fact is that these next few months are critical. And if we know what to do in this fight, this is not the time to abandon. There's been times when America has been in deeper trouble, and our founders and our forefathers that respected our flag, they gave it to us. We're not going to let it die on our watch because of people like you, and I mean this sincerely, because of EmpowerU, and because of your willingness to recognize that knowledge overcomes fear, educating yourself. And I love what you see about those precinct posts. How do 2% of the population of the country control school boards and do all this stuff? You know how they do it? They show up. And we can walk in. I just checked it the other day. Out of 300 and some school districts in the state, there are only, I think, 28. I counted 28 school districts that are having primaries. That means that in all of those school district slots, there's no 2 people running for them. So they don't have to have a primary in virtually the entire state. This state, like this country, is available to people who want to steal it. And there are people who do. But because of you, they're not going to do it. God bless.
Thank you very much. Stick with us a minute.
He told me to wait for something. So, all right.
Yeah, stick with us just a minute. We've got, could we give it up another round of applause for what a great speech. I want to say hello to everybody online tonight. It's great to see you. I'm glad so many people could sign up. And Bob has been so kind to be at many of our events. Gosh, I think tonight's the best I've ever heard you talk. I mean that. I wanted to give Bob a very special award from EmpowerU also.
Oh, good.
And I just wanted to tell you a little bit more about him. And this award we're going to give tonight to Bob is an Empowered Citizen Award, and it's the Statesman Award. Come on up, Bob. Let's give you,
Thank you.
embarrass you a little bit.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, I didn't get a chance to introduce a couple of great people tonight. We've got Betty Overstreet, our executive director down here. Let's give her a round of applause. Nita Thomas, who was instrumental in tonight's program, and Jay Grunke. Bob, stay up here. I've got a couple things I want to say up. Stay up here. I'm making you uncomfortable. But I wanted to talk about Bob's character and his dedication to what he believes in. His example of this is his dedication to the Council for National Policy, where he is the executive director. The Council for National Policy is one of the oldest and most effective organizations in history. And I mention this because it illustrates that Bob devotes so much of his time to important causes. He's internationally known as a speaker, but he's always willing to come and talk to EmpowerU about important subjects like tonight. I just want to say that in the spirit of tonight, we want to thank Bob again and say you are a true statesman. And let me see, what does your award say, if I could read that to you?
Please do.
For pursuing liberty and standing up for the values of America. Bob McCune, statesman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you so much. And with that being said, Standish, do you have want to come up and, or Jim Burns, say a couple words? Bob, come on back up here again. Okay, you can borrow mine.
Can you hold this?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, Bob, come on up here. Oh, good. Yeah, let's do this right up here. Thank you for your presentation tonight. And, you know, Standish, where are you, Standish? Standish made a foolish offer. He told me that I could have a $100 budget and that whatever as long as it was something Bob McEwen was going to be really happy with, I could keep the rest. Woohoo! So
Second party purchase.
kept it. So I went to Walmart and I went up and down every aisle and couldn't find anything you'd be happy with. I went on to Amazon.com, and yesterday I'm in the backyard of my house. I live in a house that was built in 1896, and I'm out there digging in the garden, and I hit something hard, and I picked it up and dusted it off. And I said, Bob will be really happy with this, and then I can keep the whole $100.
Oh, a brick. Well,
Wouldn't open it up.
well, wonderful. Okay. Good deal. Well, thank you, Jim.
I wrapped up myself, you know.
Believe it or not,
I asked Mary Ann to do it. She wouldn't do it.
if it's from you, it's from you
She
guys.
says,
I
that's
love it.
silly.
Okay, now what is Ohio? Well, thank you.
So we
very,
got a
very
brick
much.
here that was buried in my garden for over
Really?
100 years, and it was made in Ohio.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it, brother. Good.
Just trying to think if I want to introduce anybody else after that. I don't know if I introduced Jay, who's on the
No,
producer
no.
board tonight. We've got Ken Bowman in the second rows on our board. It's just been an honor to be with you tonight and to kind of help you learn. EmpowerU is about helping you get more empowered in your lives for you to do great things, because each of you have that ability to do something special. And I'm just, we're honored to be here with you tonight. Have a great night. We appreciate you hosting us tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Hassan.